Welcome to One Chapter, One Thought. I'm Pastor Chris from Lincroft Bible Church in New Jersey, and every weekday I read one chapter of the Bible and offer one brief devotional thought. Today's reading is from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 42. Then the man led me out of the temple courtyard by way of the north gateway. We entered the outer courtyard and came to a group of rooms against the north wall of the inner courtyard. This structure, whose entrance opened toward the north, was 175 feet long and 87.5 feet wide. One block of rooms overlooked the 35-foot width of the inner courtyard. Another block of rooms looked out onto the pavement of the outer courtyard. The two blocks were built 3 levels high and stood across from each other. Between the 2 blocks of rooms ran a walkway 17.5 feet wide. It extended the entire 175 feet of the complex, and all the doors faced north. Each of the 2 upper levels of the rooms were narrower than the ones beneath it because the upper levels had to allow space for walkways in front of them. Since there were 3 levels, and they did not have supporting columns as in the courtyard, each of the upper levels was set back from the level beneath it. There was an outer wall that separated the rooms from the outer courtyard. It was 87.5 feet long. This wall added length to the outer block of rooms, which extended for only 87.5 feet, while the inner block, the room towards the temple, extended for 175 feet. There was an eastern entrance from the outer courtyard of these rooms. On the south side of the temple, there were 2 blocks of rooms just south of the inner courtyard between the temple and the outer courtyard. These rooms were arranged just like the rooms of the north. There was a walkway between the 2 blocks of rooms just like the complex on the north side of the temple. This complex of rooms was the same length and width as the other one, and it had the same entrance and doors. The dimensions of each were identical. There was an entrance in the wall facing the doors of the inner block of the rooms, and there was another on the east at the end of the interior walkway. Then the man told me, "These rooms that overlook the temple from the north and south are holy. Here the priests who offer sacrifices to the Lord will eat most of the holy offerings. And because these rooms are holy, they will be used to store the sacred offerings, the grain offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings. When the priests leave the sanctuary, they must not go directly to the outer courtyard. They must first take off the clothes they wore while ministering, because these clothes are holy. They must put on other clothes before entering the parts of the building complex open to the public." When the man had finished measuring the inside of the temple area, he led me out through the east gate to measure the entire perimeter. He measured the east side with his measuring rod, and it was 875 feet long. Then he measured the north side, and it was also 875 feet. The south side was also 875 feet, and the west side was also 875 feet. So the area was 875 feet on each side, with a wall all around it to separate what was holy from what was common. One thought. Along with every temple must come priests. And this passage depicts many of the rooms which were used for the priests. Now, these rooms, it says, were used so that priests could eat a portion of the sacrifices. The priests really didn't have their own allotment of land within Israel, and so the functions of the temple provided for the priests, so they would often, kill and cut up pieces of the animal for the sacrifices, and other parts of the animals they could eat. So they were eating in there. These rooms also stored all the holy instruments, probably like the knives and all of that stuff, and their clothes. The term holy here means something like devoted for a purpose. And so these rooms are devoted for a purpose of worshiping the Lord, and the priests use them. And so in the Old Testament, just to give a little background here, in the Old Testament, there were 3 sort of classes of priests. The most prestigious position, the most important priest, so to speak, was called the high priest. The high priest was someone who was a descendant of Aaron, Moses' brother. So only a descendant of Aaron could be high priest. And it was a very exclusive club then. And it was the high priest's job to oversee and manage all the other priests of the temple. And most significantly, it was the high priest who would offer a sacrifice on the Day of Atonement to appease the wrath of God in Old Testament times. So the high priest, it's like the most prestigious position, the most important position, and this was a descendant of Aaron, so kind of an exclusive club. Then there were other priests, and these other priests came from the tribe of Levi. So Aaron also came from the tribe of Levi. So the high priest, think of like a Venn diagram. All the priests are from the tribe of Levi, and within the tribe of Levi, a subset, the descendants of Abraham, only those could be the high priest. But back out to the larger circle, the tribe of Levi, all the priests came from the tribe of Levi. And these regular priests, so to speak, they did the day-to-day duties of offering sacrifices, teaching the word of God, judging between different disputes. And then finally, there were other Levites, other people from the tribe of Levi, who were just the assistants to the priests. They could guard the temple, they would clean up the temple, but they didn't offer sacrifices or anything like that. And so what we find in Ezekiel 42 is that in these rooms in the temple are primarily used for the priests to eat some of the meat after it was sacrificed, storing the tools and utensils they would use in the sacrifice, and changing their clothes. In other words, the priests were to devote themselves fully to the worship of God, and they were provided space to do it. Now, the New Testament picks up some interesting categories from the Old Testament because it says that Jesus is our great high priest. He is the most prestigious priest, and he offered the best sacrifice. But then through Christ now, the New Testament tells us that we are all priests. 1 Peter 2 says, "You are living stones that God is building into his spiritual temple. What's more, you are his holy priests. Through the mediation of Jesus Christ, you offer spiritual sacrifices that please God." So our sacrifices are not animals. And our sacrifices do not provide forgiveness. Jesus' sacrifice provides forgiveness. But our sacrifices now as priests, they are responses to what Jesus has done. They are sacrifices of prayer and praise. And so as a priest of God now, whether you're male or female, whether you are living in America or in some other country, you are a priest of Jesus Christ, and your job, so to speak, is to offer sacrifices of praising God and praying to him. And you also get the responsibility of teaching others the Word of God in many, many different contexts, whether teaching the Bible in a classroom or just sitting down with someone, opening the Word. You are fulfilling that priestly function. Have you ever thought about yourself that way? Maybe not, but this can give great significance to all of your discipling efforts.